My son, if thou wilt receive my words and hide my commandments with thee, so that thou incline thine ear unto wisdom and apply thine heart to understanding. Yea, if thou criest after knowledge and liftest up thy voice for understanding, if thou seekest her as silver and searchest for her as for hid treasures, then shalt thou understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. My son has already occurred in chapter 1 verse 8, 10 and 15. It indicates that any son of Solomon, see 2 Samuel chapter 7 verses 13 to 15, can find spiritual truth and wisdom in the passages, and whether the reference is to Rehoboam or the sons of John chapter 1 verse 12, the book should be read and heeded. My words, my commandments. God has more to say than the Decalogue, and his words, notice the plural, are to be treasured, not merely the message or doctrines or fundamentals of his word. See Revelation chapter 22 verses 18 and 19. To receive and hide are the equivalents of John chapter 17 verse 8 and Psalm chapter 119 verse 11. And both the expressions are to be taken literally. The ear, the heart, were the instruments through which the knowledge and wisdom were to be received until the scriptures were written. And after that it's the eye and the heart which receive the message. Notice the numerous passages that point out the necessity for a believing heart and eye, or a believing heart and ear. 2 Timothy chapter 4 verse 4, Matthew chapter 13 verse 16, Acts chapter 28 verse 27, Romans chapter 11 verse 10, 1 John chapter 2 verse 11, Romans chapter 1 verse 21, chapter 2 verse 5, Luke chapter 6 verse 45, etc. Again we find wisdom, understanding and knowledge mentioned verses 2 and 3. Evidently understanding and knowledge are not as easily found as educators would have us think. The seeker in this passage must cry after knowledge, lift up his voice and beg for it, seek for it like he would go after a buck on a sales deal, and search for it like a prospector panning for gold, verses 3 and 4. It evidently doesn't come to merely spending a few years studying for examinations. The drift of the passage is be as anxious about obtaining understanding as you are in making a living. Very few Americans would think of taking such advice. Nearly all philosophers know the story of the pupil who came to the guru seeking wisdom and was held under water by his teacher till he nearly drowned. When the seeker arose sputtering and gasping for breath, his teacher said, "Now when you want wisdom as bad as you wanted air just then, you are going to get it." There are other illustrations. The seeker desires to become wise and is told that he has to buy a horse he has never seen. The seeker pays $1,000 for the horse, goes to get it and discovers it has been dead more than 24 hours. He returns to the wise man to get his money back, but cannot. For when he paid for the horse, he signed a contract. In a rage, he accuses the wise man of being a phony and is told, "You see there, you are getting wise already." But the passage before us deals with something far more serious. For if its similitudes are accurate and the Bible never misses, the real lover of wisdom must forsake houses and lands to get it. For that is what a gold prospector does. He will go alone or at the most with one another, for gold prospectors are not found in droves. He will be on the job 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, for those are the hours people give who are seeking silver, and he may lengthen this to 10 or 12 hours a day, as many people work 2 shifts or hold 2 jobs to make a living. Furthermore, the seeker has to be asking and praying the entire time. Verse 3. The result of this intensive search is found in verses 5 and 9 and 11. The fear of the Lord, verse 5, discussed under chapter 1, verse 7, is wrongly interpreted by the pulpit commentary as follows. It here means the reverence due to him that comprises the whole range of the religious affections and feelings. Of course, it means nothing of the kind. The whole range of religious affections are compassed in such word as beloved, see Song of Solomon, love, see the Psalms, Eov, Psalm chapter 119, verse 161, worship, Genesis chapter 24, verse 6, honor, reverence, dread, admiration, etc. Fear means fear. It has always mean this and always will mean it. The knowledge of God, verse 5. This is the knowledge about God, not what God knows. It's the hidden wisdom which is laid up in verse 7, and Paul has much to say about this in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and 2. Although much about God cannot be known, Romans chapter 11 verse 33, Job chapter 11 verse 7. A great deal more can be known, the scientists and educators would have the sinner believe. All the ancient Greek philosophers were agnostic, ignorant, when it came to God knowledge, Greek theology. And what passes for theology today is no more related to knowledge about God. Agnosticism has always been fashionable, even though Huxley, 19th century, was the first to pull up the dead word from the dead Greek language to impress the common folk. The Latin equivalent is ignoramus, but the Greek is always more impressive and high-sounding. The fact that Huxley, Einstein, Wells, Van Doren, Bowman, Caddoux, Darwin, Dever, Russell, and the Greek philosophers were dumbbells when it came to knowledge of God is no excuse for any other sinner, as most sinners have more common sense than the men listed above and also have keener moral discernment. The world's great philosophers, when viewed at close range, show remarkable agreement on ignorance of the Bible, ignorance of the future, ignorance of moral and ethical values, ignorance of the new birth, ignorance of the laws of mathematical probability, where they touch Bible prophecies, and extreme ignorance in matters of common sense. See 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 1 to 10. Such superficial exegetes as Hegel, Comte, Fichte, Schelling, Strauss, Dever, Astrup, Bauer, Russell, Huxley, Laplace, and Kant could hardly be expected to contribute anything worth knowing about God's person, work, purpose, intentions, plans, programs, methods of dealing, revelation, self-revelation, power, governmental designs, or attitude towards science and philosophy. Calvin, 1509 to 1564, had more to contribute than all of these men combined, and John Calvin was far from being a profound student of the Bible. The knowledge of God is plainly connected with the self-revelation of God through his book. Notice carefully the following passages and their relation to each other. 1 Samuel chapter 3, verses 1, 7 and 21, Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 29, 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 20. A sinner can get to know God's power by observing creation. A sinner can get to know God's attitude towards his creation by studying his written revelation. A sinner can get to know God's eternal purposes before he works them out. Isaiah chapter 48, verses 5 to 7. A sinner can get to know God's wrath by rejecting his revelation. A sinner can get to know God's law by obeying his revelation. A sinner can get to know God's providential care through the use of praise and prayer. A sinner can get to know God's viewpoint on art, music, sports, science, philosophy, religion, sin, politics, government, exercise, money, child raising, marriage, divorce, separation, communism, Catholicism, Islam, etc. The knowledge of God is not as inaccessible as the agnostic would have you think. Acts chapter 70, verse 23. It's only inaccessible to a self-righteous sinner who flatly refuses to examine the evidence. John chapter 7, verse 17. Herod and Pilate and all dishonest skeptics come under this classification, and what Einstein and Kant found out to be an impossible task, thousands of farmers and coal miners have found to be a pushover. Luke chapter 10, verse 21. For the Lord giveth wisdom, out of his mouth cometh knowledge and understanding. He layeth up sound wisdom for the righteous. He is a buckler to them that walk uprightly. He keepeth the paths of judgment, and preserveth the way of his saints. Then shalt thou understand righteousness and judgment and equity, yea, every good path. All three of the valuable treasures, chapter 2, verse 4, are to be found with the Lord himself. Verse 6, wisdom, knowledge, understanding. Furthermore, they are given, verse 6, this means that Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, Dewey, Hegel, Kant, Russell, etc., ad infinitum, had to reject a free gift in order to erect their agnostic systems of humanistic rationalism. They were not the first to do so. In Genesis chapters 2 to 3, there is a similar account. When Solomon asked, he received, 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 9 and 12. And James said that any man could ask and receive, James chapter 1, verse 5. Either God is a liar, or else the great philosophers of the world were in the innermost essence of their natures self-righteous hypocrites. Any of them could have obtained the knowledge. The catch obviously is that the glory for such knowledge must be given to the Lord himself, chapter 2, verse 6, and Isaiah chapter 28, verse 9. And this is something that no worldly philosopher was able to do. He, as many presidents, wanted peace on earth to men of good will. This is the Roman Catholic reading of the Latin Vulgate, not the Reformation Greek text. But if the prize was to be giving glory to God in the highest, he, as 400 generations of his followers, would just as soon go on with wars and rumors of wars. The wisdom of verses 6 and 7 is laid up for the righteous and for them that walk uprightly. It's not for the agnostics who develop ethical systems with vague definitions of the supreme good, situation ethics, new morality, and all the perversions which are going on. In the passage, God does 6 things for the man who truly seeks after wisdom. He gives him wisdom, verse 6. He speaks to the man, verse 6. He stores up wisdom for the man, verse 7. He protects him, verse 7. He protects him specifically from unjust judgment, verse 7. He preserves him, verse 7. And when God does this to the seeker of wisdom, the seeker understands righteousness and judgment and equity, yeah, every good path. Compare chapter 1, verse 3. It's evident from the passage that if the Lord is not a liar, any real wisdom lover can solve 98% of the problems which have bothered philosophers for centuries, provided he does 3 things. First, searches earnestly and prayerfully. Second, gives God the glory for what he finds. Third, walks according to the light that God gives him. This simple formula eliminates the entire system of Greek philosophy, Colossians chapter 2, verse 8. Paul was the perfect example of the educated skeptic, but in addition to this, he was moral, upright, and deeply religious, Philippians chapter 3, verses 1 to 6. He followed his conscience, Acts chapter 23, verse 1, and went by the light he had, John chapter 1, verses 4 to 8. And when that light broke into the glorious light of the gospel, shining in the face of Jesus Christ, 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4, Galatians chapter 1, verses 15 to 16. Paul was not disobedient to the heavenly vision, but gave God the glory, Romans chapter 1, verse 21, and followed to the chopping block, 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 1 to 9. The light which God gave him, Ephesians chapter 3, verses 1 to 4, the problems that bothered the Greek philosophers of Paul's day were elementary exercises, and alongside Romans, Ephesians, Philippians, and Galatians, Plato's Republic and Aristotle's Metaphysics look like kindergartner finger painting beside Rubens' descent from the cross. The way of his saints. These are Old Testament saints, like those mentioned in Daniel chapter 7 verses 21 and 25, and Deuteronomy chapter 33 verse 2. And yet it's apparent that preservation is a New Testament doctrine which matches 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verses 8 and 9, even better than Psalm chapter 23. Every good path is described in Isaiah chapter 2 verse 3 and chapter 40 verse 14, Micah chapter 4 verse 2, Proverbs chapter 4 verse 11, Isaiah chapter 26 verse 7, and Jeremiah chapter 6 verse 16. These paths are paths of peace, contrary to those of Romans chapter 3 verse 17, and the way of peace have they not known. It's a good word for this warmongering generation again.